The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous supporters. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/donate. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode number 91.
On the Doctor. I've lived for over 2,000 years. I am Scottish. I can complain about things. Shush.
Hi, I'm Don Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're continuing our preparation for the next season of Doctor Who by discussing new Doctor Who showrunner Chris Chibnall's previous work on the show. He wrote several episodes of Doctor Who beforehand, and we'll also discuss some of his other work that he's done on TV. But joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
So, yes, Chris Chibnall. He was announced that he, last year, I think before we knew who the new Doctor would be, we knew that Stephen Moffat was leaving his controversial leadership of the show, and that Chris Chibnall had been hired to replace him, and that he has some experience on the show. He's written a handful of episodes before, one episode, Martha Jones episode, and then the rest from the Amy and Rory period episodes and webisodes, and one that sort of defies categorization. We'll talk about that when we get to it too. And they've been of varying quality.
Yeah. He also wrote a lot for Torchwood. He actually wrote more for Torchwood than he did for Doctor Who. And I feel it's kind of a limitation. In a way, it's not quite fair to the audience of our listeners, because we're not going to really be able to talk about the Torchwood stuff because none of us have really watched Torchwood. So
what I saw of Torchwood I didn't like, and it just wasn't something I wanted to get into.
Yeah. Me
well,
too.
He was the head writer for it, so he was kind of the, kind of what
showrunner for the spinoff.
Yeah,
sort of.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. That's so. But given that, we're going to talk about what he did for Doctor Who, how that might inform, what we're going to see from him, and we'll also talk about what we've. Another show that he's written that's been extremely popular called Broadchurch.
Yeah.
That's,
it would be an interesting point of feedback from the listeners who have seen Torchwood to say, well, okay, what does Chibnall's time as head writer for Torchwood tell you about how he might do on Doctor Who? Because we're going to look at what he's done for Doctor Who, what he's done on Torchwood. You can fill in that missing piece for us. To me, the fact that I didn't like Torchwood enough to even watch it is not a great sign.
Right.
And spoiler alert, his Doctor Who stuff, I think, is mostly mediocre. So that's not a good sign.
Mediocre to bad. Mediocre to bad.
Yeah. However, I think that Torchwood, at least the first two seasons of it, were really good. And so that's a good sign.
I mean, Broadchurch.
Broadchurch, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, 2-syllable name. Can't handle those.
So let's start with his Doctor Who stories, which the first one that he wrote was called 42. And we'll actually be discussing this in detail not too long after the end of the next the new season of Doctor Who, because we're as part of our rewatch we'll get to this pretty soon after that. But it's a Martha Jones story, and it's the 7th episode of that season. And someone mentions in commentary, it's the Martha's first trip as an official companion, because her previous trips were part of his thanks for helping him in Smith and Jones, which is I don't know, that's a fine distinction, I suppose, but
that's a little different distinction.
Yeah. So the synopsis. Well, let me just give a quick synopsis. Says the Doctor and Martha, they follow a distress signal. They end up trapped on a spaceship that's hurtling towards the sun, and they have TARDIS separation. and they have 42 minutes left till impact, and they have to save the day. And by the way, something else is on the ship, and it's trying to burn everybody to death.
Yeah, and so as the title indicates, this episode is played out in real time. So you've got 42 minutes. That's after the setup. That's the length of the episode, and it's basically a combination. Notice also 42 is the opposite of 24. Which is a famous TV series that's played in real time.
Still current at the time that this aired in 2007.
Yeah.
And of course, 42 is the meaning of the life, universe, and everything. So
that as well.
A Douglas Adams reference. Douglas Adams, a writer for Doctor Who.
But what this plays out like is a combination of 24 meets the movie Alien.
Right.
Because there's like a threat hunting down people on this ship. And it's not a widely liked episode, but I like this one. I think this is fine. It's a fun adventure. It has an interesting concept for the monster. It's like a solar energy being that lives in a sun, and that's cool. And then you have this series of puzzles that have to be solved that are entertaining because the crew on the spaceship, each doorway on the spaceship has a security question that you have to be able to answer. And one night before the episode, they all got drunk and reprogrammed the security questions. And now they don't remember the answers. And so you get some interesting questions that have to be solved. I love the one about pre-download. Who had the most #1 hits, Elvis or the Beatles? And because this is set in the future. And another one is like, what's the next series in these numbers? And the doctor realizes they're all happy primes. And everyone's going, what is happy primes? Every number that meets this definition is happy. Every number that meets this definition is happy prime. Every number that meets both definitions is a happy prime. Don't you people teach recreational mathematics anymore?
Yeah, there's some good lines. And like you said, the pacing is good. The story, I felt like was pretty well written. There's several twists in the story. A couple of moments where you think this is the resolution, everything's fixed, and then it turns out that there's an additional problem.
Complication. Yeah. There's a great moment where Martha is in a kind of an escape pod thing and has been cast off from the spaceship, and she sees the doctor in a porthole as she's falling away from the spaceship, and it's like, we're doomed, and how are we going to get out of this? And that's a great moment.
And there's also a really nice part of the story where she was calling her mother. The doctor had fixed her phone like he had for Rose to be able to call from any time in space back home, and she's trying to hold a conversation with her mother, who's this overbearing woman that we remember from Smith and Jones, and not let on that things are that there's trouble, that her life is in danger, even as her mother is trying to get her to like reassure her the doctor's there, right? You're as long as you're with the doctor, you're fine, right? And so there's this really nice, Martha is put on this emotional roller coaster through this episode, and it's put in extreme situations. So I agree with you, Jimmy. I tended to like this one more than some of the other ones, but
I think this is the best of the Chris Chibnall episodes.
Yeah. I agree with that. Absolutely.
And I would put it slightly above average. It's not one of my favorite all-time episodes, but it's above average, and I would easily rewatch it just for fun.
Oh yeah.
So you agree, Father Cory?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Just for all the reasons you guys, I just let you guys talk because everything you're saying I agree with. So
okay. So then the next set of Chris Chibnall stories is a two-parter from season 5. It's Amy and Rory and the Doctor, and it's Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, and it's the reintroduction of the Silurians to Doctor Who.
I would say this is a step down from 42. I don't hate these episodes, but they're just kind of meh.
I kind of like the Silurians in this. In the first episode, the Silurians are, there's one Silurian. They're sort of masked, and they're there's this sinister feeling because you don't get to see them. All of their action takes place in the shadows, and so it's the unseen enemy, and so there's that tension that comes from that, and I like that. And the second part, I mean, honestly, the resolution of the second episode is so forgettable to me. Like I've watched the second episode like several times now, and every time I'm like, how do they wrap this up? How do they fix all this? And I just never remember it. It's so convoluted. One
thing I like about the resolution is, so they introduce I think this is the first time they mention it. I could be wrong about that, but they introduced the idea of fixed points in time, where history is definitely going to go one way, and if you mess with that, really bad things will happen. And so that is something conceptually the series needs, because it can't constantly be changing history, or it will kill the drama in the show if you can always go back and change something. And so this concept of a fixed point puts a dramatic limit on the storytelling, which you need for the stories to have meaning. And it's been there before, kind of, but now they've made it explicit. But then what the Doctor does is he says, guess what? This isn't a fixed point. You humans and Silurians can negotiate a peace together and live together if you want. And that's conceptually nice. I like that.
Well, it's also consistent with, we talked about Doctor Who and the Silurians from the third Doctor, the first time we ever see the Silurians.
Yep.
And it's very consistent with that, because what was the Doctor trying to do there? Trying to establish peace between the Silurians and the humans. Right. One thing I do like about this is he definitely wrote the Silurians a lot less annoying than they were back then.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Especially the noises they made. Those were very annoying.
Yeah. And even then, the Silurians were portrayed as a mixed society in terms of they don't all share the same ideology. They have differences of opinion among each other, and they can be reasonable.
Yep, exactly.
So the other thing about this story that is often forgotten is that it had major series implications. This story featured the death of Rory.
One of the deaths of Rory, yeah.
Exactly. So Rory, at the end of this, dies, and
but it's a throwaway crack in time death where he gets unwritten from history.
He's absorbed, and then and it actually, I kind of liked the way that that part was written, which was the tragedy that So Amy loves Rory. And the tragedy is that she doesn't remember him, and only the Doctor remembers Rory, and so she doesn't get to grieve for him, and so there's actually a nice moment where we kind of get the sense of grief is part of the process, and to not be able to grieve for someone that you've lost, that you've loved, is a great tragedy that she doesn't even realize exists, and I thought that was a nice moment that he wrote in there. I'm not sure whether he wrote that alone or whether Moffat inserted that as part of the larger mythos for the season or not. But I like that part of the story. So from Cold Blood, we go to something a little different, which was in 2012, so a couple years later, as part of episode 7 or previous episode season 7, we have something called Pond Life, and it was a series of webisodes that are now a YouTube
compilation you can watch.
Yeah, you can just watch it on YouTube, and it basically, the best way to describe it is the Doctor is checking in on Amy and Rory's life after leaving them
by phoning them and leaving messages on their answering machine.
Right. And the big part of it is over a period of time, what the message is, another message, the enduring part of it is, something happens to Amy and Rory's relationship at the end where they're breaking up, where they're married and they're going to get divorced. They're in the midst of, as we get into the next season, they're in the midst of a divorce.
Previous to that, though, these are meant to be fun, light episodes where like an ood shows up at their house in their bathroom, which is a nod to John Pertwee's famous line that Doctor Who is more effective when it's a Yeti on your loo than being on an alien planet. And so they like have this ood that the Doctor has temporarily dropped off at their house. And it being an ood, it wants to immediately become their butler. And so you get, domestic comedy based on that, which is why it's called Pond Life. But then the domestic situation by the end, we learn, has soured, even though the Doctor doesn't know it.
Right. Well, he gets a sense of it. I think he leaves another message on the answering machine. And, he says he attempted to visit their home, but they were out. He's sure everything's all right with them. But as he's recording this message, we see this black and white footage of Rory storming out of the house and Amy shouting at him. And then he hangs up. He said, call me if you need me. Hangs up. And for some reason, he has this bad feeling and deletes the message so that Amy then comes in the house and checks the answering machine, because this is when people had answering machines, and finds no message. And then she says, "We need you, Raggedy Man. I need you." And that's the end of it. And
Did people have answering machines in 2012?
I think they were still lingering answering machines around. Yeah, people still had landlines and answering machines.
I didn't.
Some of us still do. We want to get rid of them, but that's another story.
Yes.
Okay.
The other thing, the other conceit of these webisodes was that each one took place in a successive month. So the first one was April, the last one was August, and then the season premiered in September. That was sort of the conceit of these. So, how does it work? It feels a lot like Power of Three, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's the concept kind of gets recycled a little bit.
I liked these. I thought they were fine. I didn't like the Amy and Rory separate bit, and I didn't like that when it was played out in the series either.
Right.
There was kind of this Amy and Rory coming and going thing where are they companions, are they not? And I didn't like that. I would have rather had them just be companions until their eventual departure rather than this will they won't they thing. Right. I didn't think that was successful, but prior to that point I thought the Pond Life videos were fun. Yes,
I exactly agree. Nothing too deep, some funny stuff. We get to see the Doctor in Mata Hari, the Doctor inventing pasta in Mongolia, some fun little moments like that.
I think I invented pasta.
So he storms into their bedroom in the middle of the night and says, "You have to come with me. The Earth is in danger." And like, what? And he's like, "Oh wait, wrong time. I'll be back." Like, okay, you can't just leave us like this.
It's gonna be hard getting to sleep now.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was kind of. Now, has the Doctor ever had married companions before this?
No, this is the first time we've had married companions.
Yeah. Okay. So I like to think that Ian and Barbara got married after they got back.
After they got back, I'm sure.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a nice retcon. Anyway,
it may even be established somewhere, but it's definitely part of my headcanon now that you mentioned it.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And then we come to the
dinosaurs on a spaceship.
The episode that was written for one line. Just like Snakes on the Plane with Samuel L. Jackson, this episode was written for one line.
Well, and just like Snakes on a Plane was a colossal disappointment, so was this.
Well, in fact, I think that perhaps this was written because of Snakes on a Plane.
I thought someone said,
sure.
Snakes on a Plane, dinosaurs on a spaceship would be a great concept. We could do the Doctor for it.
Let's one up that.
Exactly.
Now, the redeeming element of this is Brian, Rory's dad.
Yeah.
He's the one redeeming element in this episode. There's also David Bradley, who is always great. He ends up playing the first Doctor later on in both Adventures in Time and Space and in Time and Twice Upon a Time. But yeah, what do we have here? We have Nefertiti, we have a big game hunter, Amy, Rory, and Rory's dad, Brian, with the Doctor on a spaceship hurtling toward the Earth. And this criminal named Solomon who's hijacked the ship, which actually belongs to Silurians, right? Is this what wasn't that the premise? I'm trying to, like, it was so bad. I'm not even sure I remember the premise correctly.
I don't remember it all.
So it's, we'll get to really take this apart when we get to it in our rewatch. But
yes, it's pretty forgetful. I mean,
I just remember it being really forgettable.
Right.
One scene I do remember from it is this is fairly far along in the Amy Rory story, and so they've gotten to the point where the companions are beginning to resemble the Doctor. And in this episode, we see Amy using the sonic screwdriver to do things on the ship, and so that's like kind of a threshold in the doctorization of a companion. Is, piloting the TARDIS using the sonic screwdriver, things like that. And we see her functioning in a Doctor-like capacity in his absence. And that's okay. I remember that. I liked that. But almost, and, in principle, I'm not opposed to teaming up with Nefertiti and a big game hunter and stuff like that. That's kind of colorful. But the execution on this was just lame.
Yeah.
And let's remember that after this episode,
The Town Called Mercy, it got even worse.
Right, and then the next Chris Chibnall episode was Power of Three, and then The Angels Take Manhattan, which was the end of the Amy Rory period as companions. Yep. So you're right. I mean, this is the end of Amy Rory as companions, and it's a sure sign of the impending departure of a companion when they start using the screwdriver and start acting like the Doctor.
Yeah, because where do you go with their character after that? They're not going to become co-main characters,
right?
And equal to the Doctor. So that's a sign they're about ready to leave.
Right. And by the way, I did confirm it was a Silurian Ark had been sent out carrying. It's actually kind of like Ark in space.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, carrying dinosaurs and Silurians in suspension to go out and then eventually come back to Earth to repopulate after the comet sent them underground.
The moon. When the
moon.
Big space egg approached the Earth.
Right.
Oh yes.
With the dinosaur dragon in it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Don't try to make it all fit.
If only they knew.
Yeah.
So then we have the Power of Three, which Father Cory, you were saying you didn't even remember.
I did not remember this episode at all. I read the description online. It's like, I don't remember watching this episode. I know I did. I've watched every episode of New Who. I know I've seen this. I don't remember it.
So
in this one, it's the penultimate Amy Rory episode. So it's the last regular adventure before their goodbye. And in this one, it starts with a neat concept. So I want to give it its props for that. It's set in what we learn from voiceover is called the Year of the Slow Invasion. And this idea of the slow invasion is a neat thing. Basically, these little black cubes just start appearing, and they don't seem threatening, and people in the show don't realize they're on a show and these are going to be dangerous. So they don't really mind these little black cubes appearing until they activate and start stopping people's hearts. And it turns out they also do other things, but they also like possess orderlies whose mouths start to look like these black cubes. And they're under the control of something called a Shakri, which we're told is a kind of Time Lord legend. It's kind of like the boogeyman. And they've got to defeat this Shakri at the end. And everything conceptually, nothing about that sounds bad, but this is another episode where fans seem to think it really falls down on the execution, and I think so too. I don't hate this episode, but it's another meh episode, and I particularly don't like the cube mouth zombies and the Shakri. The Shakri seems like a totally throwaway, disposable villain. Yeah. And the fact you've said he's some Time Lord legend. I'm sorry, that's not effective world building. If something is scary to the Time Lords, you need to build him up as something more than just a throwaway villain that we meet for 5 minutes and doesn't do much.
Right.
So I like some of the concepts in this episode, but I didn't like the execution.
I felt like this might be another case of the title drove the plot, in the sense of they want to talk about the power of three: the Doctor, Amy and Rory.
Yeah,
but also
notice something. If something is to the power of three, it's cubed.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So I feel like that sort of drove the plot. This is I think a case where elements of the story were better than the plot itself, which was, the Doctor came to live with them. So we previously had Pond Life, where we saw them, their life without the Doctor. Now the Doctor's living. What would it be like to have the Doctor as a housemate? I mean, that's sort of the idea. We kind of saw that with James Corden. That episode. I can't remember the name.
There's two of them. Yeah.
Yeah, but the one where the lodger, right, where he was renting a room from him. But this is, what if the Doctor came to live with his companions? And there was some funny moments, and how the Doctor is so manic, he could never settle down in one place and just live a suburban life.
Yeah, and this is role reversal, because normally the companions go to live with the Doctor rather than the reverse. Yeah.
Right. It brings back Kate Lethbridge Stewart, which was nice to have her back in the story. Apparently, there was a Kate Stewart character played by a different actress in some direct-to-video Doctor Who during the 90s, before the new Who came back. Something called Deimos Rising and something else. But there was... So I saw references to it. I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, that's something we need to talk about, the interregnum Doctor Who direct-to-video quasi-semi sort of legal fan productions. But we need to do an episode on those at some point.
That would be, that we should put that down. So, and it had Rory's dad, Brian, in this one as well, making another appearance. And so that was good. And then one more story that is,
which they didn't even film.
Right. So it's the Angels Take Manhattan was the episode in which Amy and Rory departed the show. They got left behind in Manhattan in the 40s due to the Weeping Angels and a fixed point in time, and the Doctor couldn't rescue them. And Brian had basically told them, Rory's dad, go with the Doctor. He'll take care of you. He'll bring you back.
And so they can't come back.
And they can't come back. And so this scene was written, sort of a postscript, literally a postscript scene was written that was never filmed and never included in the original story. But then they eventually, as part of a proposed DVD extra, they were going to actually film it. That didn't happen. And so a storyboard version with Arthur Darvill doing the voiceover was created. It's written by Chris Chibnall, who did not write Angels Take Manhattan, which I think is interesting. And what it depicts,
and you can watch it on YouTube.
Yes, well, and we'll put a link in the show notes. And
we should do that for Pond Life as well.
And Pond Life, yes. It depicts Amy and Rory's son, who's now an American gentleman older than Brian, who's Brian's grandson, coming to Brian about a week after they left and delivering a letter from Rory explaining what happened, and this is your grandson. And it's very affecting. It's very emotionally affecting.
This is good. I wish they'd filmed this.
Yeah, it would have. I mean, I think they felt like there was so much emotion just with the Doctor and Amy and Rory that to focus on Brian would kind of deflect from the Doctor's pain, and the Doctor's the primary character, so you miss that. But it was very good, and I wish they'd at least put it on the DVD as a film thing. So that's Chris Chibnall's. He didn't write anything for Capaldi,
which
now,
may be a blessing given how shaky the Capaldi era stories were anyway.
Exactly. Right. So, overall, like we said, there were some high points, some very low points, some medium points, some very low points. It was more. There were good elements in some of these, some very good elements in some of these, but none of them really was a home run as complete stories. That's my
If I were to combine the high points and the low points and average them on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say Chris Chibnall's writing on Doctor Who to date has been like a 3.5 or a 4.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's pretty low.
Yeah, it's not terrible, but it's not. It's a little below average. I mean, it peaks above average at times. I liked 42.
Yeah.
But I really hated Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, and The Power of Three and Hungry Earth, Cold Blood were both kind of meh. Some of the best stuff he's done was in the webisodes.
Right. Yeah. Right. Which is interesting. I guess I'd agree. I might bump it up a little higher to just about average. Compare that to Moffat's pre-showrunner turn. I think a lot of people felt like that his average was higher.
I would say Moffat on my scale would be about a 6 or a 6.5. And that is an indicator, because I think some of Moffat's stuff is a 10. He had multiple 10s.
Oh, yeah.
And
absolutely.
so if he just averages out at 6.5, that means he's got some really low ones too.
He's got some stinkers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say as far as showrunners go, I put Moffat ahead of Russell T Davies. I liked Moffat's work better than Davies' work. I felt Moffat's stuff was a little more modern.
It was also more high concept. Moffat would build up longer running things like, the River Song and Amy and Rory with River becoming a family on the TARDIS for the first time. The Doctor getting married. All of this stuff was very high concept compared to Russell T Davies.
And I know it's a matter of taste, but I liked Moffat's quick-witted writing. I know some people don't, but I really enjoyed it, and I'll kind of miss it. But so maybe Moffat will write future episodes.
I doubt
unlikely.
That. Unlikely, but Chris Chibnall, we'll have to see what kind of dialogue skills he's got.
Yeah. Well, given, and let's move on to our next topic. Given that the dialogue in his other series, his recent series, Broadchurch, was very quippy, very snappy. That gives me high hopes. So Broadchurch was in case you haven't seen it, was a BBC. I think it's BBC.
Yeah,
it was a British production. I don't know off the top of my head if it was BBC or not, but a British production starring David Tennant as a detective, very crotchety, very Scottish detective in
like a young Peter Capaldi.
Yeah, pretty much. And a young in a seaside touristy village, and in the very first episode, the very first moments, a young boy is murdered or dies. And so his death is investigated, and as a murder, and so the whole first season is whodunit.
Right.
The second season is the trial of whodunit. And then the third season is a whole other story.
Unrelated crime.
An unrelated crime, yeah.
And so the other lead in Broadchurch besides David Tennant is Olivia, what's
Colman.
her name? Yeah.
Colman.
So it's basically a buddy cop drama where you have initially was expecting a promotion. She just, in the first episode, she gets back from a trip abroad. She's been on vacation. She's expecting a promotion. And instead, David Tennant gets slid in over her head. And that sets up an antagonistic relationship initially between the two of them, because he's got the position she was basically promised. And now they have to work together to solve this horrific crime. And she's a native of the town. He's an outsider. He's got a checkered past.
Yep.
And they're very psychologically complex characters. They're very intelligently written. There's a lot of tension between these characters, but they eventually do establish a good working relationship, and they push each other on different aspects of their lives. There are twists in this. It's this season is really well written. Then they get to the resolution, and the resolution holds up. And then in the first episode of the next season, you get a huge twist. Something happens that nobody in the town is expecting. It throws all of their lives into chaos. They grind forward through adversity to a resolution that is, again, not at all what you're expecting. Yeah. And it's very successful writing, very psychologically complex, very satisfying. Now, this is a murder show. And it's about the murder of a child, so it's intense. And it's a modern show, so there's cussing and things like that in it. But it's a very effective drama if that's your thing. Then the third season, nowhere near as successful. There's another twist that they could have taken with the existing plot line that they don't take. And instead, they introduce a totally unrelated crime for the third season. And it's a big step down. It's nowhere near as dramatic. The show becomes much preachier and much less satisfying.
The other part is they also go back to the background of the David Tennant's character, D.I. Hardy, to kind of resolve the mystery of his appearance in the first. What is his history, his scandalous history? They sort of resolve that. Not just sort of, they do resolve that, and they have more with the characters and situations from the first two seasons.
So
there's a lot going on.
Yeah, they play with that, but they don't make it the central focus, and so it feels like a letdown.
Right. I felt like the relationship between Ellie and Hardy, it kind of felt like a doctor companion relationship in some ways. Like, he is the older, cynical, more experienced policeman. She's younger than he is, but she's not young. I mean,
she's mature. It's kind of like Dr. Donna.
Yeah, but she's much more optimistic, small town, that sort of thing. But plays a foil to Hardy's cynic and cynicism, and actually is valuable. She's not just the clueless small town cop. She actually contributes. Yeah, and so there's a complexity to the characters.
She's competent, and of the two characters, she's the central camera character. She's our viewpoint character.
Right. And then there's the secondary characters, which it's got a large cast of regular characters. Jodie Whittaker, who is our 13th Doctor, plays the mom of the deceased child. And we get her emotional reactions.
Coaster.
Yeah, and it feels true to life. I mean, it feels like this would be how it could be. Would be. And in fact, in the second and third seasons, I felt like her character really actually felt true throughout those two seasons.
I found myself, obviously, in the first season. I agree. I think she's very true to life. She's very sympathetic. The grief that she's going through and the agony and the confusion is very believable, and you really sympathize for her. And something starts to happen with her and her husband that actually in real life frequently does happen when a child dies. Her marriage starts to break up.
Yeah.
And that's believable too. When we get to the third season, though, she's moved beyond being someone that I find myself naturally sympathizing for. She's become unforgiving and indignant. And I don't find she's not wounded anymore. She's become unforgiving and indignant. And I'm sorry, I don't find unforgiving and indignant people sympathetic.
I think but I don't think that was unintentional. I think that was intentional. I think it was intended to show that, this is what can happen to people, because we see she encounters other people who've lost children in violent crime, and this is what can happen to people who've been touched by violent crime like this, that they can become unsympathetic. I think it was intended to be that way. So I don't think it's a fault of the writing misfiring, but whether that character should have gone there, that's
and I agree. People can be wounded by their experiences, and they can close off emotionally in a way that could make them unsympathetic. But the problem with unsympathetic characters is I find them unsympathetic, and I want to sympathize with the characters. This is one of the big problems with the movie Gone with the Wind. Nobody in this movie is a sympathetic character except Mammy, and she's not the main character.
Exactly.
That was what was there was a movie. I can't remember. There was the same. I had the same things. Like I want them all to die. Like, just could everyone just die? I had other Doctor Who connections in this series. Arthur Darvill plays
a priest,
an Anglican priest.
Yeah. Yep. Who is a sympathetic character. He's got this tough challenge. He's in this teeny little place. And so
everybody's mad at God.
Everyone's mad at God. He's got to try to be a healer and a bridge in the community, even though it's a very secular community at this point in England's history. And so he's he's an underdog. But he's a sensitive, sympathetic character, and he's a basically good guy.
He kind of starts off by, with tropes and, kind of naive, but he evolves a bit over time, which is good.
And he stands up when needed. I mean, he'll give pushback.
Yeah. So, Father Cory, did you get a chance to see Broadchurch? Or
I really only saw probably about half of the first season when it was still airing, and then time, and life got in the way. And I liked what I saw. I mean, what little I did see, a lot of the stuff you guys talk about, especially for the first season, was, it's so true. It really is, what I saw was a well done series.
You should, if you liked what you saw, you should definitely go back and watch at least the first two seasons.
And I want to do that. I was just looking online. It is available for purchase on Amazon Prime Video. So it is available, and it's an ITV production. It's not a BBC production.
Okay. That's what I realized after I said.
I was hoping it was on BritBox, since I already have the subscription of that for Doctor Who, but unfortunately not.
I know. I kept saying to my wife while we were watching it, like, I really want to see D.I. Hardy and Ellie as the Doctor and companion.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see David Tennant come back, but as that personality, which we couldn't because of course they just did Capaldi.
He's really jaded and cynical in that. I don't know that I want to see the Doctor being that jaded and cynical.
I don't know. It felt like, especially by the end of the second season, it started to change. But I don't know. I kind of like seeing the Doctor, the difference. See, I kind of like Capaldi. I liked that difference from the Tennant and Matt Smith kind of loopy Doctor. I wanted to see, I don't know, I feel like to see something different, but that's just me. And I don't have as long of a history with Doctor Who as you guys. So,
should also mention, they tried to take Broadchurch and bring it over here on Fox. Fox Television called Grace Point. And it died. It didn't get past the first season at all. It was the same story. That's the thing.
And it had David Tennant in it.
Yeah. As an American. So it was transplanted to California from a California coastal town from
Yep.
an English coastal town. David Tennant playing an American detective. It was a shot-for-shot. The first episode was a shot-for-shot remake of the first episode of Broadchurch, and then it diverged from there. And I don't know if that was the problem or what, but yeah, like you said, it just didn't work. It could be just that the actors were not up to the task, or
there's a long history of American remakes of British shows not working.
Right.
I remember back in the 70s, they remade the Faulty Towers with B. Arthur as a show called Amanda's by the Sea, and they remade The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin as a show called Reggie with Burt Campbell from Soap on it as the main character.
Wow.
But they did remake The Office, and that was a success both sides.
Yeah.
That was a success.
So it does happen occasionally. It's
arguably
rare.
bigger success even.
Yeah.
One thing I think that is one of the reasons these sometimes fail is American TV, and this may be changing in the Netflix era, but classically American TV will take the edge off because it's trying to appeal to a broad audience because it's not government supported. It needs ratings.
Right.
It tries to appeal to a broad audience, and so it'll take the edge off of British stories. So, like, there's that classic episode of Faulty Towers where one of the hotel guests has died, and they're trying to hide the body, to keep people from being freaked out by it. And so you have this dead body, like in a clothes hamper and things like that. And in the American version with B. Arthur, well, guess what? He's not dead. He's just unconscious, which totally takes the edge off of it.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, exactly. So I think, is there anything left to say about Chris Chibnall's?
Yeah, I think there's one thing for me, which is, so Broadchurch, at least the first 2 seasons of it are awesome. And that's a hopeful sign to me for Chris Chibnall's era of Doctor Who. On the other hand, Jodie Whittaker, I find myself as that series goes along. She's never the central character. Initially, she shows us a believable wounded character that you really sympathize for, and then she becomes an intolerant, unforgiving character that you don't sympathize for.
Right.
In neither of those roles does she show me what I want to see in a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And now, Chris Chibnall may say, oh, well, I wrote her this way and I know she's capable of so much more. And this is a tribute to how great an actor she is, that she could do both of these things I wanted her to do. But she still hasn't shown me that she can be a likable, fun character that, I would want to travel through space and time with.
Well, but that's happens every time there's a new doctor. Matt Smith, who had ever heard of Matt Smith when he came out? He was a relative unknown, really, even over in England. He was kind of like, a lot of bit parts and things like that, as I recall. He never really had like a leading role or major leading role before Doctor Who. Or even
maybe a better example might be Peter Capaldi, whose prior work was this TV series where he was cursing, very abrasive, very angry.
That was the shtick on that show, but that was a comedy.
Yeah.
Right.
Jodie Whittaker has not played comedy for us yet. So I'm not saying this is a bad sign. I'm just saying
we don't know.
It's an inconclusive sign.
There's some question marks.
Yeah.
So So this kind of leads actually into what we're going to talk about next time, which is we're going to, what's our advice for Chris Chibnall? But
what's he need to do?
Yeah. Yep. So
we're going to give him our nickel's worth of free advice.
For it to be a success.
We're going to give him our nickel's worth of free advice.
Exactly.
Now that the series is filmed.
Right. But before we get to that, we want to hear what you listeners think about Chris Chibnall's previous work on Doctor Who, what you thought of Broadchurch, and how you think that fits in with Doctor Who.
And if you've seen Torchwood, what you think that, what light that sheds on all this.
Definitely. We want to hear what you thought of that as well. So you can do all that. Let us know. Go visit sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page and leave us some feedback there on this show's posting, or send us an email to doctorwho@sqpn.com. You can either write out your comment or you could record some audio feedback. Your phone's voice memo function is great for that. And you can find links to all our personal social media and websites, as well as I'll put the links to the YouTube videos on our show notes on sqpn.com.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. Do all that great stuff and share with your friends.
Yes, please do. Let's spread the word, especially as we've got a new season of Doctor Who coming. We'll be tackling each of those episodes as they air, this is a big moment in Doctor Who history. A lot of us are going to want to talk about it. So help your friends to find us and join us in this conversation. We want to participate with them. So, like I said, next time we'll have our dear Chris Chibnall, our advice. So until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Tom.
Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Glad to be here, and thank you.
And once again, I'm Don Bettinelli. Thank you for listening. And remember, as Ellie says to D.I. Hardy in Broadchurch, you don't eat fish and chips. What kind of a Scot are you?
When will I see you again?
Soon, I expect. Or later. One of those.